I've watched people for decades now, and I've noticed something fascinating. When things go wrong in their lives, they've got a list of reasons why. The economy's bad. Their boss doesn't appreciate them. Their spouse doesn't understand them. The government's messing everything up. Their parents didn't give them the right start. The weather's been terrible. Traffic's always bad. And here's what I've learned after all these years. All those people with all those problems have one thing in common. Want to know what it is? It's them. They're the common denominator in every single one of their problems. Now, that might sting a little bit, but stay with me because this is actually the best news you'll ever hear. If you're the problem, then you're also the solution. Let me tell you, life doesn't get better by chance, it gets better by change. And the only thing you can really change, the only thing you have complete control over in this entire world is you, not your circumstances, not other people, not the weather or the economy or your past, just you. And that, my friend, is enough. I remember when I was 25 years old, broke, with nothing to show for 6 years of working. I had pennies in my pocket and promises I couldn't keep to my family. And I did what most people do. I looked around for someone to blame. The company wasn't paying me enough. The economy was tough. I didn't have the right education. But then something happened that changed my entire life. I met a wealthy man, a mentor, and he asked me a simple question. He said, "Jim, how much money are you making?" I told him about $57 a week. And he said, "Well, that's terrible, but let me ask you something else. Who's in charge of that?" I started to answer with my usual list of excuses, but he stopped me. He said, "Jim, if you'll change, everything will change for you. But you've got to work harder on yourself than you do on your job." That sentence hit me like a freight train. Work harder on yourself than you do on your job. See, I was working hard. I was putting in my 40 hours, sometimes more. But I wasn't working on me. I wasn't reading books. I wasn't learning new skills. I wasn't developing my character or my philosophy or my attitude. I was just showing up, doing the minimum, and expecting maximum results. And life doesn't work that way. It never has, and it never will. Here's the fundamental truth that changed everything for me, and it'll change everything for you too. Your income rarely exceeds your personal development. Think about that. If you want to earn more, you've got to learn more. If you want to have more, you've got to become more. Don't get paid for the hour. Get paid for the value you bring to the hour. And if you want to bring more value, you've got to develop more value within yourself first. Now, when I talk about focusing on you, I'm not talking about being selfish. I'm not talking about ignoring everyone else and just thinking about yourself all day. That's not what this is about. I'm talking about self-responsibility. I'm talking about taking complete ownership of your life, your results, your future. See, most people want to change their circumstances, but they don't want to change themselves. They want a better job, but they don't want to become a better worker. They want a better marriage, but they don't want to become a better partner. They want more money, but they don't want to become more valuable. And that's backwards. Everything starts with you. Let me tell you something else. Can't give what you don't have. If you don't have peace within yourself, you can't bring peace to your family. If you don't have discipline in your own life, you can't teach discipline to your children. If you don't have skills and knowledge, you can't provide value to the marketplace. It's like they tell you on an airplane, put your own oxygen mask on first before helping others. Why? Because if you pass out, you're no good to anybody. Same principle applies to life. If you're broke, broken, bitter, and barely getting by, you're not in a position to help anyone else. But if you focus on you, if you get yourself right, then everything you touch gets better. The beautiful thing about personal development is that it compounds. Einstein called compound interest the eighth wonder of the world. Well, personal development works the same way. If you get 1% better every day, just 1% by the end of the year, you're not just 365% better. The compounding effect means you're exponentially better. One small improvement stacked on another, stacked on another. Reading one book leads to insights that help you understand the next book better. Developing one skill makes the next skill easier to learn. One small discipline leads to another, and before long your whole life is transformed. But here's what happens to most people. They work hard on their job 40, 50, 60 hours a week. They work hard on their house, their yard, their car. They spend time on their hobbies, their entertainment, their distractions. But how much time do they spend working on themselves? How many books did they read last year? How many seminars did they attend? How many new skills did they develop? For most people, the answer is none. 0. They'll spend 40 hours a week working for someone else, but won't spend 1 hour a week working on their own personal development, and then they wonder why their life doesn't change. See, when I talk about focusing on you, I'm talking about a comprehensive approach. I'm talking about your mind, what you're putting into it, how you're developing it, what you're learning. I'm talking about your body, how you're taking care of it, what you're feeding it, how you're moving it. I'm talking about your spirit, what you believe, what you stand for, what gives your life meaning. I'm talking about your skills. What can you do? What value can you provide? How are you becoming more capable? And I'm talking about your relationship with yourself. Do you like who you are? Do you keep promises to yourself? Do you respect yourself? Most people are strangers to themselves. They don't really know who they are or what they're capable of. They've never spent time alone with their own thoughts, never really examined their own beliefs, never tested their own limits. They live their entire lives reacting to whatever comes their way instead of creating the life they actually want. And the reason is simple. They've never focused on themselves long enough to figure out what they want or who they need to become to get it. Here's what I've learned. Life responds to deserve, not to need. Doesn't matter how much you need more money or a better relationship or better health. What matters is whether you've become the kind of person who deserves those things. And the only way to become that person is to focus on your own development. Got to. Work on you. Every single day. Not occasionally, not when you feel like it, not when it's convenient, every day. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. Jim, that sounds like a lot of work. Right, it is. But let me ask you this, what's the alternative? Keep doing what you've been doing and hope for different results? That's not a strategy. That's insanity. See, you're going to pay a price either way. Either going to pay the price of discipline or the price of regret. And let me tell you, the price of regret weighs tons, the price of discipline weighs ounces. When you start focusing on you, something magical happens. Everything else starts to fall into place. Not because life suddenly gets easier, not because your circumstances magically change, but because you change. Become the kind of person who handles challenges differently. Become the kind of person who sees opportunities where others see obstacles. Become the kind of person who attracts success instead of repelling it. Become valuable. And when you become valuable, everything changes. Think about it this way. If you plant a garden and the seeds don't grow, do you blame the seeds? Do you blame the earth? Or do you examine what you did? Maybe you didn't water enough. Maybe you didn't prepare the soil. Maybe you planted in the wrong season. See, the seeds have all the potential in the world, but they need the right conditions. Same way with you. Got incredible potential inside you right now. But if your life isn't growing the way you want, you've got to look at the conditions you're creating. And those conditions start with you, your habits, your disciplines, your daily practices. The truth is, most people spend more time planning a vacation than planning their lives. They'll spend hours researching hotels and restaurants, but won't spend 5 minutes thinking about where they want to be 5 years from now. They'll read the manual for their new phone cover to cover, but won't read a book that could change their entire philosophy. Priorities are completely backwards. Let me share something with you about the power of focus. When I finally started focusing on my own development, I started with books. My mentor told me to read, and at first, I resisted. I said, I've already been to school. He said, Jim, formal education will make you a living. Self-education will make you a fortune. So I started reading. And let me tell you, the first book I read opened up a whole new world. It wasn't that the information was so revolutionary. It was that reading that book made me think differently, made me question my own assumptions, made me realize how little I actually knew. That's what happens when you focus on you. Start seeing yourself clearly, maybe for the first time. Start recognizing your own patterns, your own excuses, your own limitations that you've been placing on yourself. And once you see them, you can change them. But you've got to be willing to look, got to be willing to be honest with yourself. And that's where most people stop. They don't want to face their own role in their own problems. Here's the thing about personal development. It's not comfortable. Growing never is. When you lift weights, your muscles tear a little bit. That's how they get stronger. When you stretch, it feels uncomfortable. That's how you become more flexible. Same principle applies to personal growth. Got to be willing to be uncomfortable. Got to be willing to challenge yourself. Got to be willing to admit that maybe, just maybe, the way you've been doing things isn't working. I had to admit that at 25. Had to look in the mirror and say, Jim, you're the problem. That was hard. My ego didn't like it. My pride fought against it. But once I accepted it, once I really owned it, everything changed. Because if I was the problem, then I could be the solution. And that's empowering. That puts you back in control. Most people give their power away. They give it to their boss, to the economy, to their circumstances, to other people. Then they sit around waiting for something outside themselves to change. But when you focus on you, when you take responsibility for your own development, you take your power back. Nobody can stop you from reading a book. Nobody can stop you from learning a new skill. Nobody can stop you from changing your attitude or improving your habits. That's all within your control. And that control, that power, is what changes everything. So let's talk about something practical here. Something that affects every single one of us, money. Because at the end of the day, we all need to earn a living. We all need to provide for ourselves and our families. And here's where focusing on you becomes not just philosophical, but absolutely practical. The marketplace pays you for one thing and one thing only, the value you bring to it. Not for your time, not for your effort, not for your good intentions, for the value you create. When I was making $57 a week, I thought the problem was my employer. Thought they weren't paying me enough, thought I deserved more. And my mentor, he looked at me and said something I'll never forget. He said, Jim, if you're worth more, go prove it. Go become worth more. That hit me hard. See, I wanted to earn more, but I hadn't become more. I wanted a bigger paycheck, but I hadn't made myself more valuable. And the harsh truth, the truth nobody wants to hear, is that the marketplace is fair. If you're not being paid well, it's because you're not bringing enough value. And that's not the economy's fault. That's not your boss's fault. That's on you. Now, some people don't like hearing that. They want to blame the system. They want to talk about how unfair everything is. And sure, life isn't always fair, but complaining about it doesn't change anything. What changes things is making yourself so valuable that the marketplace has to pay you more. And that starts with working on yourself, developing skills, expanding your knowledge, becoming more capable. Let me break this down for you. There are some people who earn minimum wage, and there are some people who earn millions of dollars a year. What's the difference? Is it that one person works harder than the other? Not necessarily. I've seen people working 3 jobs, exhausting themselves, and still barely scraping by. I've also seen people working reasonable hours and living abundantly. The difference isn't in the hours. It's in the value. The person earning minimum wage is bringing minimum value to the marketplace. The person earning millions is bringing tremendous value. That's how it works. And before anyone gets upset with me, understand this. I'm not saying minimum wage workers aren't good people. I'm not saying they don't work hard. I'm saying they haven't yet developed the skills that command higher pay. And that's something they can change. That's something anyone can change. But it requires focus. It requires working on yourself, developing yourself, making yourself more valuable. Here's what I did. When I realized I was the problem, I started asking different questions. Instead of asking, why won't they pay me more? I started asking, how can I become worth more? Instead of complaining about my situation, I started looking for skills I could develop. I read books on sales. I studied successful people. I worked on my communication skills. I learned about philosophy and personal development. And bit by bit, year by year, my value increased. And as my value increased, so did my income. Not because the economy changed. Not because I got lucky. Because I changed. The connection between skills and income is direct. Want to earn twice as much? Become twice as valuable. Want to earn 10 times as much? Become 10 times as valuable. It's that simple. Not easy, but simple. And the beautiful thing is, it's completely within your control. Nobody can stop you from learning. Nobody can. Stop you from developing skills. Nobody can stop you from making yourself more valuable. Let me tell you about books. A good book costs what? $20? Maybe $30? For that small investment, you can learn from someone who spent decades mastering something. Think about that. Someone spent 30 years learning their craft, made all the mistakes, figured out what works, and then wrote it all down for you. And you can learn it for $20 and a few hours of your time. That's the bargain of the century, but most people won't do it. They'll spend $20 on a meal that's gone in an hour, but they won't spend it on a book that could change their life forever. I used to spend my money on things that made me feel good for a moment. Entertainment, distractions, things that depreciated. Then I started spending my money on things that appreciated: books, seminars, courses, anything that made me more valuable. And that shift, that one shift in how I invested my resources, changed everything. Because I wasn't just buying information, I was investing in myself. I was increasing my value. And the return on that investment? Unlimited. Here's something else I learned. There's what I call the 3% club. Only about 3% of people do what it takes to be successful. Not because the other 97% can't do it, because they won't do it. They won't read the books. They won't attend the seminars. They won't put in the extra effort to develop themselves. They want success, but they're not willing to pay the price for it. And the price is focusing on your own development. The price is discipline. The price is doing what others won't do so you can have what others won't have. Most people will work 40 hours a week at their job. Some will work 50 or 60. But ask them how much time they spend on personal development, and the answer is usually zero. They'll spend all that time working for someone else, making someone else rich, building someone else's dream. But they won't spend even 1 hour a week building themselves, developing their own skills, creating their own value. And then they wonder why they're not getting ahead. Let me ask you something. If you owned a company, would you rather hire someone who reads, learns, develops themselves, constantly gets better? Or would you rather hire someone who does the minimum, never learns anything new, and stays exactly the same year after year? The answer is obvious, right? So why would you be the second person? Why would you be the person nobody wants to hire, the person who brings minimum value? The only reason is because you haven't focused on making yourself better. There's a difference between the millionaire mind and the minimum wage mind. And it's not about intelligence. I've met plenty of smart people who are broke. Intelligence doesn't guarantee success. What guarantees success is constant improvement. It's the decision to work harder on yourself than you do on your job. It's the commitment to becoming more valuable every single year, every single month, every single day. The millionaire mind thinks about learning and growing, thinks about skills and value, thinks about how to serve more people at a higher level. The minimum wage mind thinks about getting by, thinks about doing just enough, thinks about making it to Friday. See the difference? One is focused on becoming, the other is focused on surviving. And your income, your results, your life will reflect whichever one you choose. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. When you focus on developing yourself, when you commit to getting better, something happens in the marketplace. Opportunities start showing up. Better jobs find you, people want to work with you, promotions come your way, not because you're lucky, because you're valuable. And valuable people are rare. The marketplace is always looking for valuable people. Always. There's never a shortage of opportunities for someone who's made themselves truly valuable. I remember when I finally became good at what I did. Took me years of study and practice. But once I became good, once I could deliver real value, I never had to look for work again. Work came looking for me. People wanted to hire me. Companies wanted to pay me, not because I was special, because I was valuable. And I became valuable by focusing on developing myself instead of focusing on my circumstances. Here's the key. Your income is a reflection of your value to the marketplace. If you want to change your income, change your value. If you want to increase what you earn, increase what you're worth. And the only way to do that is to focus on you. Focus on learning. Focus on developing skills. Focus on becoming the kind of person who delivers tremendous value wherever you go. Think about it like this. If you're earning $30,000 a year, the marketplace is saying you're worth $30,000 a year. If you're earning $100,000 a year, the marketplace is saying you're worth that. If you're earning $1 million a year, well, you're bringing $1 million worth of value. That's how it works. The marketplace isn't wrong. It's not unfair. It's measuring your value and paying you accordingly. So if you want the payment to change, you got to change the value. And the beautiful part, the marketplace doesn't care where you came from. Doesn't care about your past. Doesn't care about your mistakes or your education or your circumstances. All it cares about is the value you bring right now. That's it. So you can reinvent yourself at any time, can become valuable at any time, can change your income at any time. But it starts with changing you. Let me give you a practical example. Say you work in sales. If you're closing 1 out of every 10 prospects, you're earning a certain amount. But what if you got better at sales? What if you learned communication skills, learned persuasion? You learned how to really serve your customers? Maybe you'd start closing 2 out of every 10. Same effort, double the results, double the income. Or what if you got really good? What if you learned from the masters, practiced your craft, became excellent? Maybe you'd close 5 out of every 10, same hours, 5 times the income. That's the power of focusing on your own development instead of just showing up and going through the motions. Most people want shortcuts. They want the income without the development. They want the results without the work. They want to be paid like they're valuable without actually becoming valuable. And that's just fantasy. That's not how life works. Life rewards value. The marketplace rewards value. If you want the rewards, you got to create the value. And creating value means developing yourself. Here's what most people don't understand. Working harder at your job won't make you rich. It'll make your boss rich. But working harder on yourself, that's what creates wealth. That's what changes your financial situation. That's what opens up possibilities you can't even see right now. Because when you become valuable, when you develop skills that are in demand, when you can solve problems and serve people at a high level, money flows toward you naturally. Don't have to chase it. It chases you. I spent the first 6 years of my working life broke. Not because I didn't work. I worked. But I worked hard at my job and not at all on myself. Then I spent the next several years working twice as hard on myself as I did on my job. And my income multiplied. Not doubled, multiplied. Because my value multiplied. And that's the leverage. That's the secret. The economy can do whatever it wants. Your boss can do whatever he wants. The market can go up or down. Doesn't matter. If you're valuable, you'll always be paid well. If you're not valuable, you'll always struggle. It's that simple. Now here's where things get really interesting. Once you start working on yourself, once you start changing and growing and developing, everything around you starts to shift. And I mean everything. Your relationships change. Your influence expands. The whole world seems to rearrange itself around the new person you're becoming. Not because the world changed, because you changed. There's this principle I've taught for years. It goes like this. You tend to become like the 5 people you spend the most time with. Their attitudes rub off on you. Their habits influence yours. Their dreams or lack of dreams shape your own expectations. It's called the law of association, and it's powerful. If you hang around 5 broke people, you'll be the 6th. If you hang around 5 negative people, you'll start seeing the world through that lens too. But here's the twist that most people miss. When you change, when you focus on becoming better, one of 2 things happens to those relationships. Either you elevate them or you eliminate them. Let me explain. When you start growing, when you start reading and learning and developing yourself, you naturally start thinking differently. Start seeing possibilities instead of problems. Start talking about ideas instead of just talking about other people. And the people around you will notice. Some of them will be inspired by your growth. They'll ask what you're reading. They'll want to know what changed. They'll start their own journey of development. Those relationships get stronger. They elevate. Both of you rise together. But others, they'll resist. They'll make fun of your books. They'll tell you you're changing, and they won't mean it as a compliment. They'll try to pull you back down to where you were because your growth makes them uncomfortable. It reminds them of their own lack of progress. And those relationships, well, they naturally fade away. Not because you're trying to be mean or superior, just because you're moving in different directions now. You're headed somewhere, and there, standing still. I went through this myself. Had friends when I was 25 who were perfectly content being broke and making excuses. When I started changing, when I started reading and setting goals and talking about possibilities, they thought I was crazy. They'd say, Jim, you're getting weird. Come on, let's just have a beer and forget about all this improvement stuff. And for a while, I felt bad about growing apart from them. Felt like maybe I was doing something wrong. But my mentor helped me understand. He said, Jim, you can't bring everybody with you. Some people aren't ready to change. Some people don't want to change. And that's their choice. But you can't let their choice stop your progress. Keep growing. The right people will show up. And he was right. As I grew, as I became more valuable and more focused on personal development, I started attracting different kinds of people. People who were also growing. People who were ambitious and positive. People who challenged me to be better instead of pulling me down to be comfortable. That's the magnetic effect of personal excellence. When you get better, better people are attracted to you. When you raise your standards, people who meet those standards show up in your life. Listen, what we're talking about here isn't some 90-day program. This isn't a quick fix or a temporary effort. This is a lifestyle. This is a philosophy that you adopt and carry with you for the rest of your life. Because personal development never ends. There's no finish line where you can say, okay, I'm done growing now. I've learned enough. I've become enough. The day you stop growing is the day you start dying. And I don't mean that physically. I mean it mentally, spiritually, emotionally. You're either moving forward or you're falling behind. There's no standing still in life. Let me tell you something about the seasons of life. Just like nature has seasons, spring, summer, fall, winter, your life has seasons. 2, there are seasons of planting, seasons of cultivating, seasons of harvesting, and seasons of waiting. And here's what I've learned. You can't change the seasons. Winter's going to come whether you like it or not. Economic winters, personal winters, times when nothing seems to be growing. But while you can't change the seasons, you can always change yourself. You can prepare for winter in the summer. You can plant in the spring so you can harvest in the fall. You can become the kind of person who thrives in any season by focusing on your own development regardless of what's happening around you. I look back now at who I was at 25, broke, confused, full of excuses, and I hardly recognize that person. Not because I'm special. Not because I got lucky. But because I made a decision to work on myself every single day for decades, and the accumulation of all those days, all those books, all those lessons, all that growth, it created a completely different person. A person with different habits, different thoughts, different results. And that's available to anyone. Anyone who's willing to make the commitment and follow through. See, that's where most people fail. Not from lack of information. We've got more information available now than ever before in human history. You can learn anything you want, anytime you want, often for free. The problem isn't information. The problem is application. The problem is people learn something and then don't do anything with it. They read a book and then go right back to their old habits. They get inspired for a week and then quit when it gets hard. They start strong and fade fast. And the reason is they haven't made it a lifestyle. They're treating personal development like a sprint when it's actually a marathon that never ends. Let me tell you about something I've done for years that changed everything. Keeping a journal, not a diary where you write about your feelings. A journal where you track your progress, record your lessons, document your growth. Here's why this matters. What gets measured gets improved. When you write down what you're learning, when you document your wins and your losses, when you track your daily disciplines, you create accountability. You create awareness. And awareness is the first step to change. I go back and read my old journal sometimes and I'm amazed. I can see where I was struggling with things that are easy for me now. I can see the mistakes I was making, the lessons I was learning, the slow but steady progress I was making. And it reminds me that growth isn't linear. Some days you take big steps forward. Some days you slide backward. But over time, over years, the trajectory is clear. You're becoming someone different, someone better. Here's the key to long-term success. Small disciplines repeated with consistency. Not big dramatic actions once in a while. Small things done every single day. Reading 10 pages a day doesn't sound like much, but that's 3,650 pages a year. That's maybe 10 to 12 books. Do that for 10 years, and you've read 100 books, while most people haven't read one. That's the compound effect again. Small actions, massive results over time. But you've got to be consistent. Can't read for a week and then quit for a month. Can't exercise for a few days and then stop. Can't work on yourself when you feel like it and ignore it when you don't. The disciplines have to become habits. The habits have to become who you are. And that takes time, takes commitment, takes focus. Most people focus on having. They want to have more money, have a better house, have nicer things. And there's nothing wrong with wanting those things. But here's what I've learned. Life is really about becoming, about who you become in the process of pursuing what you want. Because at the end of the day, what you have can be taken away. The economy can crash, the house can burn down, the money can disappear. But who you've become, nobody can take that from you. The skills you've developed, the character you've built, the wisdom you've gained, that's yours forever.